Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to part 2 of our causes of the American Revolution. This is the second of 2 PowerPoints so far about the American Revolution, and we are going to focus on 4 additional causes of that revolution. This slide is about the big picture causes of the American Revolution. You see here we have the economic causes that we're going to discuss, which we should all be familiar with, things like mercantilism. That's one of the things we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about the social and cultural causes. Sometimes that's also known as socio-cultural. We're also going to talk about the political causes and the intellectual causes. This is the big picture, big idea slide, and I'm going to break each of these things down as we move forward. Now we're going to talk about some more specific causes of this American Revolution that was rather epic. All right, so we discussed in the previous PowerPoint in part 1 of the causes these guys right here, acts passed by the British, salutary neglect, and mercantilism. So if anybody has questions on those, please refer to my previous presentation because that's where you can find that information. But in this presentation, we're going to focus on the other 4. We're going to focus on the Enlightenment. We're going to focus on the Great Awakening. We're going to focus on the Boston Massacre. We're going to focus on the French and Indian War. Okay? So hold on. Enjoy the ride. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, I am super pumped because we are about to, Morgan's laughing next to me. He finds this hysterical. Yes, that's okay. We're going to talk about the Enlightenment because I'm here with my 8th grade U.S. history class, and this is good times. We're going to talk about the Enlightenment. That's okay. You guys can clap. Go ahead. Yeah. We're excited. We love the Enlightenment. All right, so what's the motto of the Enlightenment? Let's really get into brass tacks here. Let's get down to brass tacks. Here is the motto of the Enlightenment: dare to know. Okay, that is the big picture idea, right? Dare to know. That is what the thinkers were all about. So this is, I want you to really, absorb this concept because this really epitomizes the Enlightenment. It was really good times. They just wanted to know and understand their world, okay? And that's really important to understand. So let's talk about this Enlightenment from the perspective of the American colonists. Now, to the American colonists, the aristocracy was not good times, okay? It was not good times, okay? They did not like the aristocracy, down with the aristocracy. Now, that is the system that was in place in Europe, and it was a system that the Enlightenment thinkers were fighting against. What the American colonists valued, they valued hard work and they valued social mobility. This was good times because basically anyone who came to the New World, if they worked hard enough, they could move up the social and economic ladder. They could make something of themselves. They could start with nothing and become a very big deal. And this is not an option that Europeans had. This is something that was unique to the New World and to the American colonies in particular. So this is something that I want you to keep in mind as we move forward. Now that we've talked about that little tidbit, let's get into some nice details about the Enlightenment specifically. What really was it all about? Well, Enlightenment thinkers wanted to apply the scientific method to all aspects of human society. They used it when they were thinking about government, when they thought about religion, when they thought about social problems, when they thought anything you could possibly think of. They were applying the scientific method to try to deal with society's problems and to try to make society better. They believed in humanism, in the ability of humans to achieve, to determine their own destiny, and most importantly, to self-govern. They believed that an individual human being could determine their own political destiny. This is very, very, very important. This is where you get the new ideas about government. And our founding fathers read all of these crazy works of philosophy and of politics, and they thought these were really awesome ideas. And they thought it was possible for us to do it. And that's part of the reason why we decided, hey, maybe we should give it a shot and try to overthrow the most powerful empire in the entire world. So that's how, a big reason how and why the Enlightenment causes the American Revolution. Let's take a look at a couple of specific philosophers, Enlightenment thinkers that were really important to the American founders and to starting the Revolutionary War. The first guy that's really key, he's the most important English political philosopher that you need to know about, is John Locke. Okay, John Locke, that is this guy right here. John Locke. I know he doesn't look too hot, but he's like good times. I mean, the guy is like, he knows his stuff. He's very, very important. We really want to understand what he was talking about, because our founders really thought he was something else. So why did our founders think he was so great? Like, what did this guy say that was so great, right? Let's talk about it. Well, first of all, he argued that every man has natural rights, this concept of natural rights, and there were three of them: life, liberty, and property. Now, what are natural rights? Natural rights are rights we have because we exist, because we are born, because we are human beings, we get this rights. And so that in and of itself, well, that's fine. You know, people can kind of wrap their heads around that to a degree. But what really blew people's minds was when John Locke said, hey, guess what? Government only exists to preserve the natural rights. Everybody was like, wait a second. But monarchy has to control everything, and it's basically a dictatorship. And, you know, human beings can't determine their own political destiny. They can't make decisions. They're supposed to be told what to do by a king. And John Locke is like, no, just kidding. That's not really how it's supposed to be. How it's supposed to be is the government should preserve the natural rights, nothing more, nothing less. This was a very radical, crazy experiment in self-government. And our founders were like, that's all right. I could get down on that. They were all about it, you know. So John Locke is very, very important. I really want you guys to understand what he's all about. The other gentleman that you should be aware of is this guy Montesquieu. And he was writing maybe about 60 years after John Locke. But Montesquieu is also really important. That's where we get the idea of checks and balances, as you see right there, and the separation of powers. So those are the key Enlightenment thinkers that I want you guys to think about and know about, because they are going to be huge influences throughout the rest of Unit 3 and as we move into Unit 4. And always remember the key motto of the Enlightenment: dare to know. That's what it's all about. Another key cause of the American Revolution was the Great Awakening, okay, the Great Awakening. And I have below some basic information of what that's all about. As you can see here, we have the date range. It was about the 1730s to the 1740s. I also have another graphic up here that gives you kind of a clue as to what that was all about. There we go, 1730s to 1740s. The first Great Awakening, that's important to keep in mind because there were two, and we're going to revisit that a little bit later. At least the Second Great Awakening comes about 100 years after this one. The basic description of it is that it was a religious revival, okay, religious revival of Protestant worship in colonial America. And it also is important to note that it grew out of a similar movement in Europe. The historical significance is it made religion more of a democratic enterprise. It resulted in the creation of several additional Protestant denominations and the beginning of this thing called evangelism, okay, this thing called evangelism. The idea wasn't just to think about God's presence or talk about it. It was to literally feel God's presence. That is what the preachers wanted from the faithful. This is what the Great Awakening was all about, okay? It was the idea that they wanted you to feel God's presence. And one of the most key preachers in all of this, his name was Jonathan Edwards, and he wrote this sermon called Sinners in the Hands of an Angry God, okay? And this was a very emotional sermon that was designed to scare and shock and awe the people who were listening to this sermon. And over here on the left, I'm going to make this a bit bigger for you guys so you can see. This is an example, a painting that shows a sermon in action with people you see. There are folks bowing their heads. She's on the ground. Dog is there chilling out. Gotta have the dog. You know. And then there's the preacher here with his arms raised, and he is standing. He's elevated above the flock, and he is preaching to them, telling them everything they need to know about God. So it was a time of a lot of active participation in churches, and it was a renewal of interest in Christianity specifically. So it's important to make a note of that, because this is one of the social, cultural causes of the American Revolution. Here we go with the Boston Massacre. This lovely little massacre. I know that's not a very nice thing to say, but this massacre happened in 1770, all right? And let me just show you a picture here of the gravestone of some of the folks that died during the Boston Massacre. Here you see their remains are commemorated March 5th, 1770, were here interred by order of the town of Boston, all right? And these were the 5 colonists that were killed by British soldiers, okay? This was a watershed moment because it caused so many problems in the colonies. The colonists were ticked off when this occurred. So what exactly was this, right? What exactly was the Boston Massacre? Well, it was a fight between a group of British soldiers and a group of colonists. The story goes that the British soldiers openly, in a very hostile way, attacked the colonists, fired into a crowd, and killed 5 people. Here, in this picture, you see Paul Revere's engraving of the events. And you can, and as you look at this picture, this engraving, I want you to notice some key ideas. Colonists are laying on the floor, and you see blood pouring out of the bodies. You see people are trying to run. The British are obviously acting as the aggressors. There's a cloud of smoke around them to indicate that they are firing tons of shots. Okay, all of them are lined up and they're advancing. They almost look as if they're in motion. They're moving toward the colonists, the defenseless colonists without any weapons. That was the propaganda. That was the story told by the colonists in an effort to rally their peers to be in favor of revolting against Britain. According to recent historical discoveries, however, that is not actually what happened. What more than likely happened was that a group of colonists instigated the British troops. And then the British troops in self-defense fired, and it became this massive propaganda story that it was the British troops were the aggressors. That's what people believed at the time. This was a major, major motivating factor for colonists to decide that we need to revolt against Britain. Because I want you folks to remember that during this time period, the colonists were split. Not everybody was in favor of revolution. There was a small percentage that were staunchly in favor, a smaller percentage that were staunchly opposed. Most people were in the middle. Maybe some leaned closer to one side or closer to the other, but they were mostly in the middle. So a disaster like the Boston Massacre helped convince many people who were on the fence to be all on board with revolution because they fully believed that the British had savagely destroyed their brethren, just went after poor, defenseless colonists, just for the sake of doing so. Despite the fact that this was not true, everyone believed it was true. And I want you to understand as we move forward that history isn't about what actually happened. It's about what people believed happened. And they acted on those beliefs, and that's how history is made. Okay, folks, the French and Indian War was really, really important. It didn't start out as a cause of the Revolutionary War, but the aftermath of the war itself is what caused it to be a cause. Okay, so initially, the French and the Indians are duking it out. The British, of course, don't like the French, so they're like, let's help the Indians and let's get back at the French, because as we learned in previous units, the British and the French, they're not buddies, okay? It's not good times. They don't like each other. They don't get along. So we, of course, as the British colonists, had to jump in with the British, fought with the Indians, okay? So, and yay, it was a big victory. We got all this territory. The French got clobbered, you know. So that was all great. Everybody's excited, and it's wonderful. So why is this the cause of the American Revolution? Well, ladies and gentlemen, there was this thing called the Proclamation of 1763, okay? And this proclamation, in an effort to not tick off the Indians, basically said that all the land that we got from the French could not be settled by colonists. So the colonists fought with the British thinking, yeah, we're going to get land and we can go and make more farms and we can like build a life for ourselves and it's all going to be great. And the British were like, nah, just kidding. That's for the Indians and you don't get any of it. So we fought and we died and we don't get jack squat. Now we're pissed. So, but to add insult to injury, it gets even worse. Let me tell you why. There's this thing called the Sugar Act of 1764 because the French and Indian War cost the British so much money, they had to raise taxes. So not only do we not get to sell the land, now they're taxing the colonists to pay for this stupid war. We are pissed. We are not happy. So this was a major, major problem. So this is why it's a key cause of the Revolutionary War. So what did we learn in this presentation? We learned about the big picture causes of the American Revolution. There were economic, social and cultural, intellectual, and political. We also learned about 4 specific causes of the American Revolution, being the Enlightenment, whose motto was Dare to Know. We learned about the Great Awakening, with John Edwards as the key itinerant preacher. We learned about the Boston Massacre and how it was basically a propaganda piece. We also learned about the French and Indian War and how at first it wasn't a problem, but with the proclamation of 1763, it became a massive issue. I hope this presentation was useful for you. If you have any questions, please feel free to contact me, and I will see you on the next video.